Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Welcome, everyone. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. I'm Sifu Sylvain. This is the Buddhahood podcast. When you download it as a podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, we are studying Shakyamuni's doctrine, his methodology for enlightenment in its ultimate form, the Lotus Sutra. And our modern day mentor, who speaks more directly to our experience of life in our capacity, our evolved mind, potential, understanding, Nichiren. Following a long line of such scholarship for the epochs and eras between our own and almost 3,000 years ago, Shakyamuni's own. And Shakyamuni spoke about this evolution in 500-year periods. We're in that fifth 500-year period, a period of study and practice for self-practice, self-realization, self-manifesting Buddha that was predicted to last some 10,000 years. What happens after that, I don't know. There are some times in my lifetime, there have been a couple of times, including this general time, where the continued existence of sentient minds on this planet has been somewhat dubious. So, all the more important to hunker down and really try to influence the situation to the affirmative, right? The respect, the dignity for life. And in that vein, we've been reading from Nichiren's many letters and treatises. And we are now engaged in a Gosho, a writing, where Nichiren has been offering a sort of a shorthand review, if you will, of the four doctrines or the different periods of teachings of Shakyamuni. I've talked about this a lot. We have studied about it. We've heard about it from different orators and teachers. But not often do we find an actual writing from our contemporary scholars, Nichiren, on this very topic. Certainly not diving into it. Nichiren mentions it constantly. This is why this sect is corrupted and why these teachings, more to the point, are ineffective now. But Nichiren spends a lot more time talking about the scholars of his day who have either invented their own corruption for greed of either political power or land acquisition or wealth or just to be part of the elite, right? The ego. But also the teachers of his day who are simply repeating and have bought wholesale that same corruption from hundreds of years earlier. It's the nature of everything that the desirous nature, the accumulative nature of samsara in the human mind is obsessed with collecting, owning, accruing, and conversely scared to death of losing and slipping away into anonymity. It's all ego, right? But, Buddhism and its study, its scholarship is no less affected, unfortunately, because we are all humans. And so scholars like Nichiren are the mentors that bring us back to reality, back to center, back to what the hell are we doing this for in the first place, yeah? So we're now about to dive into the fourth doctrine, the perfect teaching. And Nichiren is going to spend a little time here because in the perfect teaching, there are, again, various facets, not least of which are the provisional versus essential or theoretical versus essential teachings within the Lotus Sutra itself, right? Now, there's one word that doesn't get said very often, and I don't know who exactly is responsible for this particular English translation. One of this list of people. Look at all the people in the listed in English translation. One of these people, or more than one, because it had to be proofread and so forth, has let this word slip, and it's a real huge sore thumb sticking out, indicating either a very confused individual or individuals, which I choose to rather not believe. I rather believe that this kind of error is made by somebody who, see, these are all Japanese people, or at very least Asian. I'm not trying to be racial here or anything. What I'm saying is that in this committee of English translation are people who've been culturally raised to see the West as a completely different kind of how can I say it? A mental construct of language, a linguistic construct of culture that, in a way, gracefully would see that the language difference is simply humans grappling with the same thing, albeit through different words, which I think is a not a very scholarly way to look at it. That's a very pedestrian way of looking at things. Not completely invalid, but in the scope of scholarship, academia, accuracy, I think can be a very serious error. And I think that that's how these words come to be, because this is somebody from a different culture and a different linguistic trying to say, well, let's use some of their words so it'll be easier for them to understand. And I think that that's a great error, because what that doesn't take into account is the tremendous charisma and also subtleties and inculcated programming that are built into those words. The Chinese had to deal with this a lot when Buddhism first started to flood into China. Even before China, in the Gandharan region in Eastern India, which is now shared by many countries, there were many scripts that the oral teachings of Buddhism were written down in. And one of the problems always has been the recognition that there are conceptual ideas in Shakyamuni's teachings, in Prakrit, that were difficult to find similes or synonyms for in different languages. And so either new words had to be created or several words had to be combined in order to encompass the idea or the concept of a simple word in the previous language. And I think that that is a much more scholarly endeavor than to try to take a shorthand, really a shortcut, and say, well, that word, we talk about a strength of mind, heart, our inculcated, committed, really a determination in our language could appeal to those who study in the West like their word faith. No. You don't understand at all. What you're discussing in your determination and so forth is a personal identity commitment within the self to grow from within the self. A determination is one thing, but to use the word faith implies an idle, unreasoned acceptance of something from outside of self without needing validation. That commitment to something ununderstandable, unreasonable, unrational is okay, because if you have faith, it'll just somehow magically manifest then within yourself. Now, I'll get arguments on what that word faith means, but in general, that's pretty much the scope of faith. Ask yourself, somebody out there who's saying, no, faith is self-motive. That's, I commit to faith. Okay, what are you committing to? Is your faith your effort to manifest from within, or is your faith effort to somehow imbue yourself from outside yourself? That couldn't be more opposite from Buddhism. And basic misunderstandings of that nature are why we have a lot of Buddhists today wishing for stuff. They got the idea in their head that the great wishing jewel of the mandala or of any form of Buddhism, whether you're using early teachings to learn how to meditate or whatever, that somehow Buddhaness or enlightenment in any form will come to you from outside of yourself. That's heinous. That's so destructive of the primary understanding of Buddhism, that we inherently are enlightened beings, that all phenomena in the universe are based on realizations of, manifestations of enlightenment, that our primary instantiation, manifestation as an apparatus to emerge this consciousness mind of the 9 consciousnesses, the various aspects of this consciousness, all exists for the same reason, simply to acknowledge it, to be aware of it. It doesn't drift into our heads from some other place. There is no all-knowing being sharing their beingness with us. It's built in. As much as your flesh or your eyeballs or your hearing or your touch, taste, smell, all of those abilities are manifestations of this potential experience. So if you can remove your idea of containing or holding on to, I should say, from your environment, this condition of enlightenment, and understand that you are enlightenment, that you just need to turn that light on, awaken it to the point, because we live moment to moment, so we're going through 3,000 choices every single moment. If you can just hang on to the fact that it's all there to begin with, then there's no need to obsess, no need to embrace, to hold on to accrue. No worry that you're going to lose something. No reason for fear. No reason for anxiety, for possession. You are the possession. Buddhaness. So when somebody in this translation, as I'm reading these wonderful teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha through the scholarship of Nichiren, I absolutely reject that there's any word that came out of Nichiren's mouth that said that all phenomena are made by the soul. What? Who just put a dog turd in the stew? What the hell were you thinking? And worse yet, these are supposedly the words Nichiren is quoting of Shakyamuni. Oh no. Have you not read Nagarjuna? Have you not read Vasubandhu? Have you not read any scholarship regarding emptiness, impermanence, the Nidana? It's just any basic Buddhist teaching, Shakyamuni's words. Anatman. Specifically, there is no such thing as a soul. You don't need to be a Mahayana Buddhist to know this. Hinayana Buddhists spend a great deal of time on this. It's consistent from beginning to end. There's no such thing as a soul. So why is it in this book? Man, I'm pissed. Who wrote that? Okay. It doesn't appear a lot, but it got through. Somebody doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. Here we go with the perfect teaching. And believe me, I say all of that because I don't want to keep repeating it as I read through this. Fortunately, I haven't seen many occurrences of this word. Not nearly as much as I've seen faith. So I'm going to correct that word with two words that are much closer to the way we understand, and Buddhism understands, all phenomena. Energy with actions, karma, manifests. And one of those, or a couple of those words that describes formations and their possible manifestations is tendencies and conditions. That we have heard repeatedly. Read anything by Vasubandhu, you're going to read about tendencies and conditions, right? the five skandhas. It's all about tendencies and conditions. The nidana is about tendencies and conditions. This is the fundamental developing, manifesting force within all phenomena. Shakyamuni's teaching. Oh, that makes sense. Not this frickin' delusional world of souls. Bags of Bob, boxes of Betty. No. Leave that fanciful, magical world to the religionists. And you'll see why I say that, because the quote from the Flower Garland Sutra is that all phenomena are made by the. All phenomena are made by the. Who would even dream of putting the word soul there? The universe? The universe. The pre-Big Bang universe was created by Stephen? It's idiotic. All right, I'm going to stop harping. So here we go. The perfect teaching, Nichiren. Next is the perfect teaching, which is of two kinds, right away. One is expounded in the pre-Lotus Sutras, and the other is found in the Lotus Nirvana Sutras. In the perfect teaching of the pre-Lotus Sutras, the practice with 52 ranks is expounded, and the three learnings of the precepts, meditation, and wisdom are established. The perfect teaching of the pre-Lotus Sutras refers to such doctrines shown in the Flower Garland Sutra as, quote, all phenomena are made by the tendencies and conditions. Quote, the time when one aspires for enlightenment for the first time is the time for one to attain enlightenment. Do you get the immediacy of that statement? This is being quoted from the Flower Garland Sutra. In other words, when one aspires for enlightenment for the first time, when that first gels, that thought, energy plus action, in your mind, that is the time for one to attain enlightenment. That's immediate. That's less than a second. That's every thought moment. So when that thought of enlightenment first manifests in your mind, that is when you become enlightened. So you see, as we study the Lotus Sutra, you can read something like that from the Flower Garland and go, well, how is that any different? The difference is context. The difference is the capacity of the people. The difference is the time. Now, with our wisdom developed from Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra, we can now go back and read these earlier teachings and go, he's never varied for a moment. He's been on this track from the get-go. It's just that people weren't ready to understand what that meant. Interesting. And, quote, the teaching is the Sutra of Perfection, end quote. It is stated in the Yuima, the Vimalakirti Sutra, and I've talked about the Vimalakirti through several videos on this channel. Quote, because all phenomena are brought about by a causative relationship, not a soul, by a causative relationship, tendencies and conditions, there is no subjectivity of self. Everything is produced. Everything is constructed. There's no engineer, Mr. Self. More accurately, self is also constructed. Because there is no self, no phenomena is created. In other words, again, the fallacy of English, there is no creator. That's what that says. Because there's no self, no independent entity from the process of life, then who there is manipulating the wheels and cranks and devices to spit out a certain thing? No one. This is just the process, the manifestations of potential. Just like ice crystals and water that is getting colder and colder and colder. The ice crystals happen as a function of the tendencies and condition of the water. As it gets colder, the crystals form, eventually solidify into ice as more of them collect. This is the process. Nobody stood at the edge of the body of water and said, ice. It wasn't created. It is a result, a manifestation of potentials, of tendencies and conditions. In that way, it's constructed, but there is no constructor. You have to really take your time to understand the meaning of the words and not just read them superficially, because you'll miss it. I'm sorry if I seem extra zealous today. I'm so put off by these misleading words, and they're in the very texts that you and I study. This is why I rewrote all of the Zenshu that I could find and made them available to you with large print so you could frickin' read them. I know that text has gotten smaller and smaller. I know I'm getting older, but for crying out loud, read the ingredients on a package of food today that print size is for gnats to read, not humans. So my books, yeah, they're bigger, there's more of them, but that's not because I've added that much to them. I've just tried to correct the language in them to say and capture more accurately what Nichiren is saying, what Nichiren is quoting, trying to derive the essential meaning, not to change it, to keep it from being changed by poor translation. So I have something like 6 volumes of Nichiren's Gosho available on the lulu.com/spotlight/Kwun bookstore. It's immensely helpful to read without these obstacles so that your mind doesn't just go bing, bing, bing to places it shouldn't ought go. And I may have to do that with these sets of translations, obviously. More work, always more work. Therefore, there is no retribution. Oh, okay, I've skipped one. Because there's no self, there's no phenomena is created. That doesn't mean it's not constructed of the tendencies and conditions of the process of life. It means it's not created in the sense of necessitating a creator. This is what Lawrence Krauss means when he talks about religion and cosmology and physics and particle physics. It's not that he's a non-believer. See, people who believe in gods look at everyone else as though they're enemies of their gods. No. They're just not mystified like you are, not confused like you are. Because as Lawrence Krauss points out, I'm picking on him right now, but many have said this, that once you start to dig into the magnificence of the universe and the way things work, science, it's so overwhelming. There's simply no need to invent some mystical forces. It's hard to wrap your mind around what's going on in skin cells. Really, it just takes very little study of any experience of thingness in the universe to be absolutely blown away. To attribute that to some magic trick, where's the dignity in that? Where do you find the glory in that? Not there. So understanding that all phenomena is born of the process, then that is an accurate definition of karma, energy being transformed by action upon it and its actions ad nauseum, manifesting. That's the true definition of karma. And if you understand that, then there is no retribution of good or bad karma. What? Oh, water forms into ice. Is that good? Is that bad? Is it good if you have a martini and bad if you have your feet sunk in the water? How do we make judgments about physical processes that are simply doing what is the process of life? It's not good or bad. It just is the process. Human beings attach goodness or badness to things. But there's only one measure in Buddhism, with words like evil, which I also don't like, as you know. I choose the words life-affirming versus life-unaffirming. It's a simple metric. Are we behaving? Is the world consciousness, sentience, cause-making of the mind behaving in a dignified, life-affirming of that beauty, that magnificence of the process? Or are you working counter to that? Working counter to it will produce results that are counter to it. As a human being, I find that repulsive. This is where all pain exists, all stress, all suffering. So if I don't want to live my life that way, I need to focus my life on life-affirming actions, thoughts, deeds. Yeah? And I recognize that as a samsaric being, my general behavior is ignorant. I don't catch all 180,000 decisions I'm making in every single moment. But the more I strive toward life affirmation and the Buddha wisdom, which is what I'm developing from maintaining Buddhaness as much as I can, those processes that are constantly going on in my life, my mind, will gradually be influenced and move toward all life-affirming thoughts, actions, deeds. That's the goal. Beyond that goal, as I live here in samsara, I consciously wish that with that development of my own enlightenment, I affect the world around me. Because, from one aspect, selfishly, it helps me maintain life-affirming behavior to influence the world around me. From a very non-selfish point of view, all life should be recognized in this way. Do we not agree? And so it's exciting to watch somebody else shift toward that realization as well. It's quite rewarding. Yes? This is our practice of Buddhism, folks. Therefore, there is no retribution of good or bad karma. However, it is not that good or bad karma will cease to exist. So this almost sounds like it's walking back that statement. But again, understand what is trying to be said here. What is the meaning of what Nichiren is trying to say? He's saying that there is no good or bad karma per se. But if a sentient mind, a being, is doing things that are not life-affirming, like killing people or browbeating, negative, driving people away from their potential enlightenment, we can objectively say that's bad. That's bad behavior. That's not conducive to a happy life, to affirmation of the life process, right? So there's a difference between language to describe and language to understand. So we have this fallacy with language that it flips around with both all the time. And that is what makes us an alert to us to be very aware, be mindful of the thoughts going through your mind. Understand what those thoughts really mean. What is foundationally being said or heard? It is stated in the Wisdom Sutra, appropriately, now he's going to talk about the Wisdom Sutras because that's the functions of the mind the Wisdom Sutra is talking about. Quote, when one aspires for enlightenment for the first time, one is sitting at the place of enlightenment. There it is again. If you truly aspire to be life-affirming, to witness all of life of the universe from that place of affirmation, of dignity, of awe, then you're doing it. Thinking it is doing it. Staying in it requires effort, practice, and the most direct, easiest way to accomplish that law of awareness, Myoho Renge Kyo if you forgot, is to personally commit to instantiating it. Na-mu. What do I, being here, instantiate, invoke? Enlightenment. The perfect perception of experience of life. In other words, Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. In the Sutra of Meditation on the Buddha of Infinite Life, quote, Queen Vaidehi was enlightened when she, with the Buddha's help, saw the world of utmost bliss, end quote. And in the Brahmanet Sutra, when people, quote, when people receive the Buddha's precepts, they are in the rank equivalent to the great enlightenment. They enter the rank of various Buddhas and become the true children of the Buddhas, end quote. Now there's several similes in that sentence. These words from the various sutras are the very essence of the perfect teaching of the pre-Lotus Sutras. They all describe this same effort to understand, to live within the great process of life. Nothing to fear about that. Revealing the 52 ranks of practice is also part of the main purpose of the perfect teaching. The names of these ranks are the same as those for the distinct teaching, but there is a difference in the meaning between the teachings, as I've been saying. That is, while the 52 ranks of the distinct teaching are not the same in depth, those of the perfect teaching have no difference in depth or superiority because each is mutually present in the other ranks. That makes sense? The ranks, 52 of them, in the more preparatory teachings of the distinct teachings, the previous doctrine, was to elicit the differences in these different ranks, which implies to human minds that there's the better, the number one, the number two, the number three, like they're distinctly different states, and some are superior to others, right? But in the perfect teaching, those same 52 states are simply taught as being interpenetrating. They're just different aspects of the phenomenon of life. You see, the context is so important. Here, even an ordinary person can become a Buddha and reach the Buddha land without experiencing all 52 ranks, because it's interpenetrant. It's everywhere within all of those potentials. I'm going to keep harping on that word because I think it's more clear to understand to a Western mind. Potential isn't a specific type. It's all types. There is no obstacle to become a Buddha, even if one does not eliminate delusions and the evil passions, because Buddha clarity is always there. One can become a Buddha by doing just one good practice, or even by observing only one precept. Because in that effort, if you are in the mind of enlightenment, as was quoted earlier, then you are there. The perfect teaching is characterized by its revealing of the truth and its merging of all the provisional doctrines and practices. That is, the Uema Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, accepts the obtaining of Buddhahood by ordinary people, reveals delusions and evil passions as the seeds of Buddhahood, and interprets evil teachings as the dharmas of the Buddhas. In other words, it's all included. Still, though, within the mind, you have to make a decision. Action, energy. Revealing such important doctrines as these, the Uema Sutra does not expound the obtaining of Buddhahood by the two vehicles. Those people stuck on words and self. The Wisdom Sutra reveals that the teaching for the two vehicles, such as denying the 4 misconceptions and 37 ways of reaching Buddhahood, be included in Mahayana teachings, but does not expound the obtaining of Buddhahood by the two vehicles as well as evil persons, in other words, persons committed to non-life affirming actions or thoughts or deeds. The Sutra of Meditation on the Buddha of Infinite Life and other sutras say, quote, ordinary people can reach the Pure Land without eliminating evil passions, end quote, which is the perfect teaching expounded in the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings. I will explain the perfect teaching of the Lotus Sutra later. The summary of the 4 teachings ends here. So now he's ended what started this document as the 4 doctrines as a segment of Shakyamuni's teachings. And now he's going to shift us from those first 4 to the thinking of the 5 periods of teaching, which Qi in the 6th century China was responsible for elucidating the 5 periods. He really organized that thinking so that it would become obvious in the scholarship, the academia, as well as in the practice of the relative order of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And I think that's a good place to break for today. We'll continue. And the next video we'll start with the pre-Lotus Sutras in the first 4 of the 5 periods. So he's introducing the 5 periods. I'm not sure how this is going to progress, but I will read it and we'll study it together. That will be followed by the Lotus Sutra of the 5th period. So this is a transitory chapter, if you will, but I'm sure we'll learn quite a lot, as we always do when we read Nichiren. So take your time. If you're endeavoring to read this stuff on your own, which is absolutely, laudable and appropriate, remember to take your time and digest. It's not relatively taught. Relatively, it's not. I haven't seen it taught in schools or in almost any aspect of society dealing with reading. In fact, when I was a youth, reading was considered something you needed to get through as quickly as possible. And we had, television commercials to sign up for courses for something called speed reading. And oh my goodness, I can read a whole 1,000-page book in an evening as I go to sleep. The issue always is retention, but I think the issue goes far beyond retention. And this is exactly the problem we just talked about with Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. This idea of knowing and retention is one thing, but that's not necessarily equatable to experience. So what I'm urging you to do as you read is to digest each sentence. If a word throws you, go do some research within the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddhist texts, on how that word is used. Or another way of doing it is to read a paragraph and digest that, and then go back and reread it sentence by sentence and see if there isn't something that within the context of the paragraph and without the context of the paragraph, the greater concept being Buddhist teaching, do those sentences begin to take on a different character? Do they point to something that hadn't been considered in simply reading the words of the sentence? Just as I've just done. That's all I'm doing with you guys. I'm reading a sentence and I'm going, understand what the meaning behind this, because we're always dealing with this amorphous, marshmallow understanding of words, translations, multiple translations. So always with a mind keenly aware that the Buddhist concept of Shakyamuni's teachings underneath this veil of words has much greater, more vast implication than simply the words themselves. And this is where you'll see where there are errors or minimizations or, trips and flaws. But through your insights, through your digging for the meaning, the contiguous message throughout the teachings and translations, it becomes quite clear, which I have to believe 3,000 years ago, when Siddhartha Gautama, as Shakyamuni Buddha, wrote the words, "Do not rely on me, do not rely on persons, do not rely on the words, but seek instead the meaning behind these words, the meaning behind these teachings. And in doing that, the truth will out. You will get it through your own insights." Because that's where Buddhahood is. Your own experience of it. Not somebody else giving it to you, handing it to you, taking it away, holding it away from you. Oh, you can have this perfect mandala if you do these things, if you pass these tests, if you're good enough. Screw you. I'm good enough because Buddha is already here in my mind. I simply need to get used to being conscious in it. So, be Buddha. Get on it. Get yourself the correct mandala. Correct, I mean, not somebody else's, not some, hierarchy priest in some group or organization. Get one that's an exact copy of a Nichiren by his own hand inscribed mandala. I want Nichiren's mandala. That's why I provide an avenue for you to just go online and get one. No test. Your test is this life. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I respect your practice tremendously. Keep it up. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. We're not perfect beings, but we can practice perfection, all of us, because that perfection is the whole universe. How can we be anything distinct from it? We wouldn't be in it if we were distinct from it, yeah? Logic, reason. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thanks again for being here. For those of you who can go on Patreon and help support our efforts here, all the videos are available through there as well. Plus, documents I put up every now and again, which are shared on the website, of course. So if you can, that's a great cause, number one. And number two, how grateful can we be for keeping this avenue of scholarship open, yeah? Or through PayPal, the paypal.me/Sifu Sylvain. All those donations go directly to mundane things like keeping the camera working, buying more memory, keeping the web access paid for, right? There's a lot of incidental expenses, and I hate to talk about them all the time, but it's a fact. And if it weren't for that, we'd have to be paying for a place of practice, traveling to that place of practice, sweeping that place of practice. This building I built for that purpose, to have this altar, to treat this as a temple, a place of learning. That's what Kwun means. It's a Chinese word meaning a sacred place of learning and practice and study. Yeah? Like in Japanese, a dojo. Same kind of thing. This is a school of quantum life Buddhism, the Buddhism of Shakyamuni, with the mentorship of Nichiren and the scholarship of studies. That's what we're doing. And so anything you can do to support that, including simply subscribing to this channel, liking the videos, comment. Comments actually help influence the algorithm. Go figure. I don't want to be a slave to those things, and yet it is our empowering platform. So I mention it because anything you can do in that regard, including just watching this video, especially this far, because I've been yakking and yakking, I profoundly appreciate your participation, yeah? Take care of yourself, be kind, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.